so that we hit the record. There we go. Welcome, 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 welcome. We're going to give everybody opportunity to come in and welcome them to another episode of Mayor Wood's podcast. Today we're talking mental health and what it means in the community police realm. So please take time right now to share this, stay locked in because we got an exciting, jam-packed conversation. We're gonna jam in. You have opportunities to post your questions below. We'll try to respond as we see fit. Some people saw the post already, submitted a couple questions. We will try to touch on a couple of those questions if we get the opportunity. But I think we're in for a great conversation in the community. We've the past couple of weeks, I don't know if any of you have heard, but I've spoken to the community with some mental health experts, especially with COVID-19. There are a lot more people feeling more anxious and anxiety, not being able to go out, and a lot of people with pre-existing mental health conditions, and a lot of things is taking place. And then this conversation is a result of some mental health things that happened with the police department in the community over the last couple of weeks that a lot of people were made aware of, and it was almost timely as we were having this conversation about mental health. And I talked to the chief and some of the panelists that we have today about it, and everyone was excited to get in on the discussion today. So without any further ado, let me introduce the esteemed group of panelists that we have here today. First, I want to introduce you to Mr. Titus Porter, who is an attorney at the Federal Labor Relations Authority. And prior to his work with them, he was an assistant district attorney in Narcotics and Gang Investigation Bureau at the Bronx District Attorney's Office. And before working there, he was a clerk for United States Labor. More importantly, he wants you to know he is a community advocate. He's been a two-time recipient at the University of Illinois Law College for most prestigious award for his achievement, his scholastic achievement. Before attending law school, did risk management trainee program at JP Hunt Transportation, where he excelled pretty quickly, and he's a former UCLA law fellow. And more importantly, he wants you to know that he's straight out of Compton, California. So y'all please give a warm round of applause to Mr. Titus Porter today.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Porter, we're going to start off. I'm going to introduce everybody, but what does community policing mean to you?
Well, to me, community policing is one of the most important things. It's being an officer on the ground. When I was a child, I was a sheriff explorer in Compton, California. And one of the main factors that was involved in community policing was officers walking around, being a part of the community, being able to work within the community, walk into communities and be respected. So for me, it's hands-on work. It's being right there, understanding that you're here to serve, you're here to protect, and you're here to protect this community in which we've invested so much in you, and we hope that you continue to invest in us.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Our next panelist, Ms. Sheba Williams, was born and raised in the Commonwealth's capital, Richmond, Virginia. She's a Norfolk State University alumni with a bachelor's degree in business management. She has professional licenses in cosmetology and barbering. She's well-rounded. In 2012, she started her own exclusive mobile barber and stylist company, which is great now, especially in COVID, meeting so many different people. And she started to run across one common thing when she was out there dealing and had a passion with people with felony convictions. And her passion for helping others be more than a conviction led her to start in her nonprofit, No Left Turn, in 2016. And the organization was born to be a support system for those with justice and court involvement, but quickly evolved into a day-to-day fight for removing the policies and stigmas around a past conviction. Please give a warm round of applause to Ms. Sheba Williams today of No Left Turn. Welcome, Ms. Sheba. I'm gonna ask you the same question as we start off. What does community policing, this whole topic, what does that mean to you?
So definitely echoing Titus's description, but taking it a step further and engaging community with the activities of public safety. So, of course, over the past couple of months, we have had uprisings and more people get involved in community work and organizing. So it also has to be a partnership. It has to be people engaged and involved, knowing their police officers before it becomes a point where they're doing policing work. Want to make sure that people in the community know who their representatives are, know who it is that's patrolling their communities, so that we don't get to a point where a thing happens. When you build relationships prior to the disciplinary phase, it's easier to understand where others are coming from. So to me, community policing is a partnership with the community and the police officers.
It's great. I love that. A partnership with the community. And last, we want to bring our panelist, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, who is a native of Prince William County, has 23 years of law enforcement experience, beginning with his career. He began his career here in Prince William County Department in 1996 as a patrol officer assigned to the Operations Division. Chief Phelps has also served as a member of the bike team. He's been an instructor at the Criminal Justice Academy, a member of the SWAT, a member of the department's incidents management team, a member of the nation's capital regional incident management team. He's been a bike supervisor. He's been a commander of the Property Crimes Bureau, Special Victims and Youth Services Bureau, Criminal Investigation Division. In 2014, Chief Phelps was promoted to the rank of captain and served as an evening operations commander, temporarily as a special operations commander and director of the Prince William County Criminal Justice Academy, overseeing basic recruit training and in-service continuing education. Chief was promoted to the rank of major in 2017, where he served as the assistant chief of operations overseeing patrol services and the Special Operations Bureau. It's important to know his credentials. He holds a master's degree currently in public education, public administration from George Mason University, a bachelor's degree in political science with a minor in criminal justice from James Madison University. He also graduated, he's a graduate of the FBI Academy, the University of Virginia's Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service, which is LEAD, the Virginia Police Chiefs Foundation's Personal Executive Leadership School, and the Police Executive Research Forums, the Senior Management Institute for Police. Now, before I bring them up, I want you to also hear what the mission statement of the Prince William County's Police Department is. The mission of the Prince William County Police Department is to enhance the quality of life by providing police services through shared responsibility with our community. Their value statement reads, the Prince William County Police Department is responsible for protecting constitutional guarantees and impartially enforcing the law. They also believe that the integrity is the basic of public trust and that honesty and equality in the delivery of police services is essential. And the third part of their value statement is we commit ourselves to uphold these values and to foster cooperation and respect within our community. Another responsibility the acting chief has currently, he's responsible for planning and direction of all department activities and is the final authority in all matters of policy operations and discipline. Y'all give a warm, I wanted to make sure we got all that in because it's all important part of this conversation. Y'all give a warm round of applause to our acting chief, Mr. Derrick Phelps.
Thank you.
We're going to start you off with the same question because I know this is something you've lived. You've been doing it since 1996, since you came out. What does community policing mean to you?
So, Mr. Porter and Ms. Williams are absolutely right. It is about being part of the community. It is working together, getting to know, building relationships, trying to, identify problems or issues, I should say, before they become problems, and making sure that we're getting the right resources to deal with those, because not everything is a police issue. Majority of our issues are that happen in the community. We're only involved because it's gotten so far down the road that we're the last resort, and now we have to be involved. So being part of the community police is knowing what's going on and building those relationships so people are comfortable with us and trust us enough that when we show up that we're going to do the right thing. And it strictly starts with building those relationships and being amongst our community, because we are community members, and working together to solve problems.
No, I mean, I think that's absolutely great as far as when we talk about the partnership in the community and getting that whole community aspect together. And it's how can we continue to tie that in? And tonight's topic, now that you all talked about community policing, is the role that mental health plays in community policing. And you know, I don't know. I know in my family, I've had different family members who had various degrees of either schizophrenia or bipolar, all of those different type of conditions. And so, what role do you feel that community policing and mental health and how do they mesh together? And I'll whoever wants to jump in there first and touch on that, that'd be great.
I guess I'll start. I think community policing is essential in our ability to deal with mental health. We have to have officers, we have to have a community where the people trust the officers. And that means the officers, the police force needs to look and resemble the experiences of that of the community. It needs to be representation. That representation then allows for the building of that relationship. A common experience allows for a common understanding. So if we start by having a diverse police force, which I know Prince William County works towards, but we need to have that representation. And then we need to have these people that are representing the police force out in the community. You don't want to have just your officers out driving vehicles. They need to be walking the same streets that the residents of the community walk every single day, so that they can see and understand what their experiences are. Because if you walk through some of these communities, you will see the same individuals with mental health issues. And by having that rapport within the community, they'll trust you, to contact the police force, and they'll believe in the police force's ability to handle and resolve conflict without the fear that it may escalate to an unhealthy situation.
Absolutely. I think that it's important to share, like we've been having these conversations for a while in the mental health arena, because clearly, you know, through the criminalization process, a lot of people who are undiagnosed, who the community knows, like we may have a favorite community uncle who suffers from substance use disorder, or, you know, alcoholism or what have you. And when they get a little outrageous, we know that they get a little unbearable. And if the police don't have that relationship, if they don't know, if they don't have the understanding in the community, it can escalate to something that doesn't require, you know, criminalization and escalation. So absolutely, being in the community is significant. Having alternatives to incarceration. And I know that it is a big ask to say 911 is where everybody calls. 911 is the number that we know who will respond at all times, but we have to have some alternatives to incarceration and penalization of different mental health issues. And that all comes down to being there, being aware and understanding the cultures. Up in Northern Virginia, there are so many different communities, there are so many different things, and all of our cultures are different. So it is imperative that police who come into the force, even police who have been on the force for years, take some time to learn the different cultures and adapt and adjust to it. Huge ask, it is a huge responsibility, but heavy is the head that wears the crown. And if we're asked to adjust to policing in the way that their mannerisms have been for years, I think that meeting people in the center and having some understanding that bringing the community into the training processes, bringing the community into cultural care is a huge step in addressing some of the mental health challenges that we see in the community to try to keep it from becoming a criminal issue.
That's good. Chief?
So spot on. All these comments are exactly right. And if we know our community, then we know, you know, who's who. And if somebody is having an issue and this is something that's been going on for a while and we're familiar with that, and it changes the dynamic a little bit, I think, as opposed to coming into a scenario where we don't know who the person is, we don't know what they're capable of. Just having that knowledge can change the dynamic quite a bit, because going into the unknown, it's very, very hesitantly and very, we need to make sure that we're all safe and everything else. Not that we would jeopardize safety in any respects, but it does take a notch down as far as, okay, we're going to this person. This is the second or third time they've had this. I understand that. So we just have a frame of mind and a reference point of what we're dealing with. We still need to look at the issue holistically as far as what it actually is, and if in investigating that. But having a mental crisis is not a criminal issue. That it is not a crime to have a mental breakdown or to be schizophrenic. That is not a criminal event. And a lot of times, because we are the only ones that are available to respond, we get called. And we usually get called again because, and to put it to a frame of mind, we're now in the ninth inning of a game and we're being called in to do something when we've had 9 innings that somebody's been trying to deal with this individual, and now they're at the end and they can't do anything else. And that's when we come in. So everything is usually on the far extreme sides. And we're trying to navigate through that. And it's important that we know the community so that they have that trust. That's where that community policing aspect comes in knowing our community and knowing what we're capable of doing, and that we're going to come and try to do the right thing and get the right resources in place.
No, that's good. You brought up a great point. I wanted to actually, I was looking at crisis intervention team, and I was looking at what the National Alliance on Mental Illness had to say about it. And they said the lack of mental health crisis services across the United States as a whole has resulted in law enforcement officers serving as the first responders to most crises. One of the programs they put in place is they talk about organizations putting together a crisis intervention team program, which is innovative, is community-based, it's approach to really improve the outcomes of these encounters that we talk about. And they said right now, I think in over 2,700 communities nationwide, they have these crisis intervention team programs to create these connections between the law enforcement, the mental health providers, hospital emergency services, and individuals with mental illness and their families. And so there are many benefits that they talk about of these crisis intervention programs. And so, Chief, have you heard of this before, and has your department implemented any of these?
So we have heard of them before, excuse me, and we just actually implemented our co-responder unit. And this is where we team an officer up with a clinical therapist, and they are responding to a call for service where somebody has, or a family member has called because they are in crisis. And the idea is to provide that service to the individual in an area where they are most comfortable. Because when you take somebody out of their environment, they get amped up, they get more uncomfortable with their surroundings. So if we can bring the services to them as opposed to taking them to the services, we're already ahead of the game there. And so by having this service, this opportunity to bring a therapist to the individual to ensure the safety of everybody else, we're able to hopefully divert more people from going to the in custody route of having to be committed or detained for their mental episode or their crisis. And we can get the right services to them, connect them, and let the therapist do their job so that we're not having to be the ones to take the lead. We want the right services to take the lead, and we're not therapists. We're not the right people to do that, and we just need to make sure the safety of everybody when we're doing
Okay.
it.
That's all a great point. So the co-responder program, what can the community do to kind of help to develop and grow this co-responder? And are you looking to create the crisis intervention team programs or policies that the National Mental Health Alliance talks about?
So I forgot to mention, thank you for bringing that up. The crisis intervention teams, we've had that for a number of years, where we're training officers to give them those tool sets to understand, identify people in crisis and give them the knowledge and again, the tools to be able to converse and try to de-escalate the situation and take their time. That has been an ongoing issue or training for us for probably about 6-7 years now. And 2/3 of our department are 2/3 of the patrol officers who actually respond to these calls for service are trained in CIT, crisis intervention training. So we have that level of commitment in trying to provide, or at least give the tool sets to those officers. And this co-responder unit is kind of a next level up. Is like, okay, we have a CIT officer, a crisis intervention trained officer, who's now with a therapist. So they're kind of tag teaming and jointly going to the scene to be able to provide therapy in the midst of a crisis. So we're committed to this process and making sure that we have the right resources in place for our community. A lot of times, though, when you talk about mental health crisis, it's often behind closed doors because people don't like to have it for whatever reason, whether it's embarrassment or they just are private individuals. They're very hesitant to ask for help. And it's a lot of this happens behind closed doors. So we don't know what's going on. And maybe somebody is receiving services. By having this therapist, we can have access to that information where we would never have before. But a lot of the issues that we see are people there's a hesitancy to call for help because they just don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn to. And it's not until things escalate so much that they can't control that they have to ask for help because they're at their wit's end or things have just gotten so out of control that they don't know what to do.
So, and I'll ask the entire panel, what are some practical reform ideas that the community as a whole can do together to help?
So I don't know if you all are familiar with the Marcus Alert. I think that you all are a little ahead of the curve with the processes and getting more people involved in the calls to service. I know that like here in Richmond, we have a drug court docket and a mental health docket that serves to give wraparound services for people who have mental health challenges and have substance use challenges. I challenge any locality to look into providing wraparound services for the trauma of being incarcerated and think, how can we divert a person from getting caught up in the judicial system from the start? Because some people don't have documented mental health illnesses. Some people, like you said, have a stigma and they say, we know that this relative has these challenges, but they are never going to see a professional. And we call 911 when it gets to a point where we can't control it anymore. So your first encounter may be no documentation of mental health. So, I think that when it comes to that point and a person is incarcerated and they go for arraignment and they've had the time to calm down, this is the time when we do an assessment to say, what are the challenges and what are the needs that brought this person to the point where they broke the law? So I know that we don't typically have wraparound services when we go into general court. We go to general district court, whether it be for traffic or whether it be for some violation. We don't ever look at the history and think what resources we're missing, because what typically happens is a person breaks the law because of lack of resources or being without. So I think I challenge everybody, community and all, like we've started mutual aid through this whole pandemic because we know that our systems kind of have been failing us. I think that it's a mutual aid benefit at the government level, and it can't just all fall on the government. It has to be community enforced. It has to be community backed. So families and neighbors, like we don't know our neighbors anymore, but I make it my business to know that if something's going on with my neighbor next door on either side, if they need some help, they can reach out to me. So I know what's going on before we get to a point where we have to call 911. But I think looking at a holistic approach from the beginning and not after a person has gone through incarceration and come out or gotten to a point where they get incarcerated and we say, okay, we're going to do an assessment then. Now they still have this charge, but they get all of the services they need once they're behind bars. And that's not that's not the best approach to it. I think being more proactive, I think bringing the community in to your CIT teams gives a way to be a little bit more proactive, especially for people who don't have documented mental health issues. I know that was a lot.
Any of you gentlemen want to add to that?
Yeah, so I have a little bit here. One of the things that I think has to be focused on when we're talking about mental health is that our communities are very diverse. We have different levels of education, we have different experiences, and because of that, it's so important that our officers have
So when you talk about diverse, because the community that's watching this phone, you're just talking about from an education. When you talk about diverse, be more specific so that we know what you're.
So when I'm talking about diversity, I'm referring to a diversity of experiences, backgrounds, social, economic, race, culture. All of these things all culminate into Prince Williams County. And with those different backgrounds, I think that community policing is going to be the first step. The second step is making sure that our officers are trained and continuously trained on how to engage in conflict resolutions. Because if you undergo training at the beginning while you're in the academy, but you don't touch that same conflict resolutions training again for another 5 or 6 years, you're not going to recall it. Nurses go through continuing education, attorneys go through continuing education. Our officers have to continuously undergo training, and not just training in regards to how to use a weapon, how to maintain safety during a car stop, but also how to engage with different communities, diversity education. We have to work with them and learning about the cultural differences that different communities engage with. Because the same way you may approach someone who's wealthy, who may be wealthy from a white background and in different social economic status, is going to be different from the way you approach someone who grew up in poverty, who doesn't have that. These different experiences comes with different levels of acceptance, different levels of understanding, and that's going to come through education. And that education has to be continuous. And we have to continuously talk about cultural training. I think that has to be at the forefront, because if you don't understand how you're approaching someone, how are you going to understand where they're coming from? So things are going to escalate immediately in these type of situations. I think here, when you have such a diverse community, our officers have to be trained enough to know, and it'll never be perfect, but to know when is a situation when I need to withdraw my weapon versus when is a situation when I can approach, take a step back, try to resolve the situation, because they are our first responders. For when people are having mental breakdowns and things of that sort, the only number that we know to call is 911. That's the number that's the first thing that comes to mind. However, sadly, that's a huge burden that we're putting on our officers. So the best thing that we can do is not just have our officers at the forefront to try to change that culture, but also to make sure that we have the necessary trainings so that these officers know and learn how to deal with various different communities, how to engage. It's going to start with education. It's going to start with hiring. That's why your officers have to match that of the community, because if they're not coming from the community, they're not going to understand how the people in that community are and why they're responding the way that they are.
That's good, Chief. You wanna take a response to that too?
He's absolutely right. I mean, the goal for every department is to be reflective of the community so that we're having those shared experiences and being as diverse as we possibly can be, because we all bring tremendous value to the table. Not just law enforcement, everybody, the whole community brings tremendous value. And it's through that shared experience that we find that middle ground and understand why certain things happen, or understand even why police react the way they do. And it's a constant conversation. And with the police department, that continuous education is very important. Cultural diversity training, cultural awareness training, that is all part of our continuous education. It just doesn't happen once, it happens every year. So we're talking about different aspects of our community, paying attention to what's going on. But with any incident that we encounter, we're relying upon voluntary compliance. That's what we're trying to gain, is voluntary compliance. And de-escalation and everything else only works as far as somebody is willing to listen. So I can try and negotiate with somebody, but if they're not going to listen to me, those de-escalation attempts are not going to work if nobody's willing to listen. And it's where we try to just slow it down, take our time, and exhaust every possible opportunity that we can before we have to take some type of enforcement action. So and that's what we train with our officers. And there's a time and a place that we can't do that. But our goal is always to take our time and make sure that we have the right things in place, listening, using distance, and trying to use our head and think through the problems. And it's not easy sometimes, very not a lot. But having that awareness of what's going on puts us ahead of the game. And that's where Mr. Porter's absolutely right, or Potter, I'm sorry, is absolutely right on the education piece, so that we are aware of what's going on and how the community perceives certain things.
And
I just want to add to that, because one of the recurring themes I continue to hear is training and education, right? And so Titus talked about diversity as far as from the social diverse cultures. How diverse is the training? I've been to some of the training academies, and most of the time that I've been there, I haven't seen any type of diversity in the training and who's administering the training. How do we get diversity in the training and education? Because I think if the people who are doing the training can't relate. I remember growing up, I used to hear people joke and say that the SATs were culturally biased, right? And I didn't understand it until I opened it up. I grew up in a 16-story high-rise apartment building, so I couldn't relate. I had no idea what a foyer was. I had no idea what a lobby. So when you read about little Jamie went into the foyer, I'm like, I know what a lobby is, but not a foyer. And so when you got people growing up in those different, how do they work their way? How do we get them to become trainers and to train from their point of contacts and those type of things? Because I know that some of the academies that I've been to, I haven't seen much training. So what's your experience as a trainer?
So what we do is we bring people in from the outside when we talk about our culture diversity. A lot of times it's members of the community. I'll talk specifically about a class that I teach. It's towards the end of the academy, and it's a class that I call Staying True to Blue, which is about the awareness of the dangers of law enforcement when you don't stay true to the mission. And I bring in community members to talk about their experiences with with the officers, good, bad, and different. I don't care what their story is. I want the recruits to hear firsthand what their experience was with an officer and how we can do that better. So that is, with our academy, I can only speak to Prince William County. We reach out, we try to bring in as much to diversify, because you're right. Me sitting up talking about culture diversity when I'm talking about the African American community or the Latino community, it doesn't have credits. I don't bring credibility to that. But if I bring somebody in to talk about that, who actually can talk about share their experiences, that the credibility is already there and people are paying attention and understanding, because it personalizes things. And that's where it's important, that why we bring people in. So we're having those personal experiences, because people pay attention to that. When you relay a personal story, people pay attention. It's not the numbers, you can recite them all day long, but when you can put a face to an experience, it sticks to somebody's heart.
Oh, that's great. I got a question that came in. What are we doing to engage to get more of the Latino community involved? And an add-on is, what are we doing to get more young people engaged? We miss out on those career fairs and all of that type of stuff now. So that's a question that came in.
So I'm going to talk about career fairs first. We're still doing those, even though they're in a virtual environment. We're still out there and trying to hire. And so please go to our website, pwcgov.org, and you click to the police department. All our all the information is there, and we're actively engaging the diverse community, and whether we're going to churches or we're going to different universities, we're constantly out there trying to recruit people to be, number one, police officers, and also part of that aspect is creating and recruiting a diverse police department. That is a fundamental goal that we have, and we've been working on it for a number of years now. But as large of a department as we are, and this isn't an excuse at all, but it's hard to move the needle of our diversity when you only have so many positions to each year to add to it. So because a career is 25 years, it takes 25 years to get that person out. So we're working towards that, and we're making steps every year to increase that. But we do have challenges. We have a significant amount of challenges because there are some cultural barriers to wanting to become a police officer. And overcoming those is very difficult because they're either generational or they are just, they come from, let's say they came from a country and their mistrust for police is so strong there. They assume that we're like that. There's just a lot of different issues that we have to overcome and just be willing to talk about and show. And I'm always willing to, I talk to everybody, I'll talk about the elephant in the room every day of the week, because it's important that we're transparent about what we're doing and moving forward for our community. So whether it's churches, fairs, whatever, the recruitment piece is an ongoing effort. And I wish there was a golden nugget. I wish I could say, hey, this is it. You do this and you will increase your diversity 100-fold. There isn't. It building relationships.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge in a lot of employments, but you got, especially with a lot of the recent events that's been highly publicized, and we've seen all over the nation protests, that there's been a lot of calls for a reform and diversity, and the distrust just because of those incidents, and people can't isolate in their mind one department in another state from a department in this county. They tie them all up, and you see that in various communities where if a police come up, people just automatically respond whether it's hate or anger that they got built up, and it's an emotion that, we say it's okay for people to have. I got a couple questions that I definitely want to get in as we move through. As we work toward further decriminalizing mental illness in our society, has the county addressed the need for more tools to help police officers distinguish mental disorders from criminal intent? Example, was somehow knowing that Sandra Bland had bipolar disorder had potentially changed the income possibly?
I'm not familiar with Sandra Bland. Is that that name is not ringing?
Sheba, you want to bring a little more light on that?
Sandra Bland was found deceased in her cell after arrest for a typical traffic stop citation in Harris County, Texas.
Okay.
The officer got upset because she was asking questions about why she was being stopped. He wanted her to put her cigarette out and different things like that. And he ended up handcuffing her and arresting her for a traffic infraction, saying that a traffic light was out. And nobody checked on her for several hours, and she ended up being found deceased in her cell. The circumstances are weird because there was no cameras in the cell where she was, and there was a national outcry because we're trying to figure out how a traffic citation turns into a death.
Right. Thank you for reminding me now. And now that you told the experience, now I remember. I have a hard time with names sometimes. So could that have helped? Absolutely. Knowing that information on the front end. But it's hard to do when we're not therapists. We're not the clinical psychologists. We're not trained to diagnose people. Yes, behaviors can appear odd and may lead us to, hey, there's just something not right here. But at the end of the day, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose somebody to be bipolar. I just have to deal with what I see at the given time. And so if I'm on a traffic stop and I'm engaging that person, if I'm not seeing the issues as maybe being bipolar or anything else, then I'm just going by what I have. Now, based on my experience or somebody else's experience, they may pick up on something. And I think that's the hard thing, is because law enforcement is very, it relies upon experience. It relies upon knowing and interactions with a variety of people so that you can see things and pick up on little cues here and there. Whereas, I mean, I've got almost 25 years of experience. I may see something that a 5-year officer may not, or a 5-year officer may see something that I'm going to miss. So it all because of what we bring to the table. So to kind of wrap that back down to the traffic stop, could that have helped? Yes, because that could have led to a little more understanding. May not have, as far as if it comes to a safety issue, it's a safety issue. And I'm sorry, safety is paramount for everybody involved. And we can't trump that just because somebody's having an episode. We have to keep them safe. The officer has to keep themselves safe as well, because that's our responsibility.
Can you talk about how people can self report? I think it's called Rescue 911. Can you bring aware? Because I don't think the community knows about when you get a call, you know, and you get a name, what comes up in your computer and that information. I know we're trying to get our officers in Dumfries. I think, is it called Rescue 911? And just explain what that is and how people.
I believe it's Smart 911. It was just released. And that is an opt-in system where you can go on to the county website and pre-populate information. So if you have a family member who maybe is suffering from Alzheimer, or if you have a child who is on the spectrum for autism, you can load that information into, so that when the call for service comes from your house, that automatically pops up. So even if it's a 911 hang up or where we can't make contact, we know, okay, wait a minute, there's something going on, because we have that information right from the start. And that can help. That can help set the tone as far as what's going on. But again, like I said, safety is priority, but at least gives it a situational awareness to what's going on, as opposed to the unknown of what's going on. And it kind of gives us a little bit of head start in how we deal with things. And it can prove very beneficial because it could set the right tone as far as what resources we need to start directing there right from the start.
So go ahead, Ty.
So I want to kind of touch on something that I know we talked about earlier, and it really does go back to training. I understand that our officers are not therapists, and that's too high of a burden to put on them. However, we must engage in some type of training and ways to recognize basic forms of mental illness so that they understand how to handle these situations. Our officers can observe someone who's under heroin use, or who's used cocaine, or who's distributed cocaine, but they can't recognize people who are suffering from a bipolar episode. We need to be able to engage in this type of training, because you're going to be dealing with thousands upon thousands of people within the county. And so you need to be able to recognize that, because that one incident where you are engaged with someone like a Sandra Bland, where someone ends up dead, is when it's a problem. So I want to focus on that. I want us to take the time to focus on how we can not just, we can self-report any type of illnesses we may know someone to have, but we also need to make sure that our officers are aware as that.
So I think I got the gist of what Titus is saying. So tell us a little bit about your co-responder program, how that works with your crisis intervention team. And I know that right now you only have one co-responder unit, and you need more probably. But tell us what your role is in mental health and how that, because the big elephant in the room, and it's a lot of chatter going on in the chat room about the incident that just happened with the senior citizen, 78, 79 years old. People are questioning if there was a mental health unit. There's a helicopter in the air. Everybody sees it. They're asking, what is the purpose of the co-responder unit? Why the officers didn't take the wife away, all kinds of questions. I know I can't answer that, but what is the co-responder unit? How does the crisis intervention team and all of that play into the role in the training? I think that to touch on what Titus is talking about there.
So, Ms. Potter, you bring up a great point. Training is crucial on this. And not that one of the issues that trying to decipher through this is a lot of symptoms mirror each other. So whether I am high on heroin or some other drug also mimics certain aspects of mental health. So being able to differentiate between the two is very difficult. All we know sometimes is there's something not right here. It's one of the two. I just don't know which way it is. And trying to, that is one aspect. But with our CIT and co-responder, we do provide that level of awareness, and we do talk about it with other officers so that they have a heightened awareness as well. Going into the situation, we talk about cues and possible what this could be, because again, we can't diagnose anything, but when we see certain things, it at least leads us down a path that this is a possibility of what this person is going through. But at the end of the day, when we get there, again, we have to ensure the safety of everybody and then getting the resources in place. And with our CIT, it is about slowing things down, so we can get that co-responder in there to provide that therapy in the location of the person in crisis. And that's the goal. We actually have 3 co-responder units now. I am looking to, in this next budget, to increase that already because there's already a demand for it. Think about those 3 are not, the program is in infancy, and we're trying to look to already expand that right from the start because we know there's a huge need for it. So there's challenges there just because, I mean, if I could snap my fingers and have it tomorrow, I would. But there also is a fiscal process in order to procure all those positions, that training. So it's not a quick fix. It's a slow process, unfortunately, but it's a process that we're going to go through to get the right resources for our community.
What role does the citizen, advisory board play in community policing and mental health right now? Like, who's advising the police on what the community needs and what's happening out there as far as mental health and community policing is concerned?
So we do that on a few levels. Engagements like this is one level. The other aspect is our community survey, which is also undergoing on how we're doing as a police department. And then there's another level, like you said, the advisory board. And that is an opportunity for, that is organizations send a representative because organizations represent a broader spectrum of the community. So when they come in, we talk about certain policies. We allow them to ask certain questions so that they can go back to their organizations and share that information. They don't have a lot of in play on mental health, but again, police departments aren't in the mental health game. We're in the safety game. So while we are doing some creative things with community services to get the right resources in place, we're not, again, it's not a criminal issue. So we're looking to collaborate with entities. So as far as the policies go, we're not specifically driving what CS Community Services does because they're the main players. We can just talk about the safety aspects and how we can work together to provide those services, if that makes sense.
Well, here's a follow-up question. It says, as we anticipate the rollout of 988 National Hotline, an alternative to 911, specifically for calls involving mental illness, how does or should that change the role of policing during those type of calls? And what resources are needed for 988 to be effective from the perspective of police officers?
So I don't know that it'll change the role because again, somebody in crisis is in crisis, and a lot of times they are a danger at that time. They're either a danger to themselves or others. There's a reason why it's gotten to that point. And so 988 we will probably still have some role. Again, it's going to be a supportive role, but that's already diverting to getting resources in play, to that co-responder, getting those resources in that manner, as opposed to kind of getting somebody who may not have a therapist with them. So I think it's more of a direct route to introducing resources, but the role of the law enforcement, I don't see changing because of the safety aspect. And the therapists aren't trained to deal with somebody who's in when they're physical, somebody who is really in mental crisis and they're being very physical. Therapists aren't trained to handle that and protect themselves. That's where we will have to make sure that we ensure their safety.
Yeah, so no one wants to... Go ahead, Shiva, you want to add something?
I want you to know that you as the chief understands that we in the community want a change in police culture. We don't want the safety to just be about police safety. We're talking about people losing their lives because of miscommunication or misunderstanding or not having enough knowledge. And I know that police have to make decisions in split seconds, but we're witnessing disparities in different communities. We're witnessing different treatment to different communities, and we want some equity in how people are treated, and we also want police officers to be safe. The goal of police officers is always to get home at the end of the night. It is the exact same goal with people in the community. And if you see a person who is putting themselves and others at danger, we want to make sure that they are taken into custody without being killed. So I think that we're hearing police safety, but we're not hearing dignity and mutual respect for the community member who is experiencing those things. And I think that's where the culture shift needs to go. We always know that police have a duty and that they have a split second to make a decision. But what we have been seeing constantly, and it is put in front of us, and it is a heavy burden to see on camera time and time again a person losing their life because of an interaction with police officers. So the uprisings happen, but this has been going on for decades and centuries. Right. It's just becoming like a public thing now. We have always experienced this in my community. I can't speak for everybody else, but we're asking for a shift in culture where there's mutual respect in an interaction. That person can be taken into custody with de-escalation tactics where they don't end up dead. So I think that's the biggest thing for me.
I think
you're absolutely right. It is about exhausting all options available so it doesn't get to that point. And I know for this department, that is always our goal. Is, and when I talk about safety, it is about safety of everybody. It's not just the officer. We have to look at it holistically. It's the safety of the person in crisis. It's the safety of their family. It's the safety of the officers. It is the entire scene that we have to look at and ensure, because that is what we are entrusted to do. So you're absolutely right. We need to work through all that processes and making sure we're doing everything possible, because the sanctity of life is paramount. And we can't just dismiss that. It is, our job is to save lives. It's not to end them, but it is, unfortunately, we do get put in those situations where somebody's life is in jeopardy, and we have to react, and because that is our obligation.
Matt, can I get an extra 20 minutes from everybody? I know we're just about at 8. Take this to about 8:15, 8:20, if that's okay. Just want to get it.
That's fine with me.
All right. Tice, you had a response to that, and then I got something after that.
Yes. So one of the things that I want to say, and I think this is very particular to the community, it's about making sure that the officers that do a great job are being praised so that they can continue the work that they're doing. Right. And so that the officers who are escalating situations inappropriately are not being put on the front lines to engage in these situations. So one of the issues that I've found and that I've seen is what is Prince William County doing to really and truly evaluate the officers that they have on the front line to decide whether or not these officers should be engaging within the community. Because I can tell you from an experience where I was reading an article about some officers that got in trouble because they do automatic reviews of officers' body worn camera footage, and some things had come up. So, what steps is Prince William County doing to make sure that the officers who are being, I don't want to say reprimanded, but at least being retrained when they're engaging in situations, when they're the ones escalating a situation when it didn't need to go there? Or their first engagement is when their hand on their pistol or the releasing of their firearm in regards to using de-escalation tactics. Because we have to start here. We have to start with being in the community. We have to start with training, but we also have to do something. And this is, I know this is tough for you, Mr. Phillips, but we have to clean house, because the mentality that we had 25 years ago when it comes to policing is different than the mentality that we will have in 2020 and in 2021. We have to make sure that our police force is representing the interests of the community in which it's serving. And it starts by first saying, hey, are you on board with actually helping and engaging, de-escalating a situation? Because we don't need officers on the force who are trigger happy. And I'm not saying that there's anyone on your force like that, but I'm saying that this is something that we're seeing when we're looking at these headlines and we're seeing these stories. We're saying, well, why didn't we approach this differently?
Yeah, I think that's there's a lot of questions built in there, and one that was coming up. What are the standards and procedures to de-escalate or neutralize a potential threat before it becomes imminent? I think that ties into and how do you handle and how do you respond to those phone calls that you get that have mental health? I think all of that ties in from the forum as well as what Mr. Potter is saying here. Chief?
So, we do a lot, and I can only speak to my department. I know nationwide, the problem is we have 18,000 different police departments, and there's 18,000 ways of running a police department. So, while I don't do, I can only speak to mine and how we do things. Everything starts with hiring. And when I hire somebody, I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for somebody who has integrity, and I'm looking for somebody who has a service mind. You have those two things, you demonstrate that to me, then you meet all the other criteria, I'm going to take a chance on you and put you through training. And then it's reinforced throughout your entire academy in treating people with dignity and respect. Those are the cornerstones of our department. Now, as we move forward in training and we give all the tools, we do have body worn cameras, and every single aspect. So we utilize those cameras on two different things. Any complaint or any use of force, we go to the body worn camera and review that. There is also a quality control review that is done by supervisors. So we're spot checking cameras from everybody on a periodic basis. With those use of force and criminal complaints, all of those go through such a layer of review all the way up to me, and I review every single case, and I'm looking at things to ensure that it's done correctly. And the way we try to look at it is it's like game film. After a game, we're looking at it. We tell the officers, look at it, see what your performance is, so that we can do it better. When we have an incident, it's looking at it and knowing how we can improve. And we're using footage in our academy as well to kind of train the recruits, as well as that we could do this better, or we can do that tactically or communications wise. We're utilizing that to make ourselves better. That's the benefit of body worn cameras. It's a tremendous value, not only for the accountability part, but the training value there is tremendous, because that puts you seeing firsthand. We can talk about it all day long, but if I can show you, then you really understand what I'm talking about. So there's constant review. So the accountability in our policies as well, that we hold each other accountable for our actions. And there's a process there as well. So that's a lot. I could go on for hours talking about that with the department.
So is there a non-lethal way to detain subjects that may seem to be a threat, or especially the question is, especially somebody of a mental illness type of situation, and you get a call, like, is there a certain way that you respond to calls of mental illness with a hopes of some? So the question is there non-lethal ways to detain people?
So the first way is our communication skills. That's how you, with any encounter, it's always about the communication and how you talk to people, talking to them very calmly and trying to diffuse how amped up they are. Because if you start amping up, they start amping up, and we try to bring that down. But again, when I said earlier, it's about voluntary compliance. So no matter what tools I use, if they're not working, I've got to switch to something else. But the whole idea is to take our time with it. And as long as the environment allows it, if somebody is just sitting on a curb and they're sitting there, I'll talk to them all day long. But if they get up and they start roaming around and causing issues, then I may have to change my tactic in order to contain them so that what I'm seeing isn't affecting somebody else or putting somebody else in danger. So I have to adjust to the environment. I have to be flexible, but everything starts with communication and goes from there, because that's our first level on anything and on any encounter. So there is non-lethal ways, and that's what we try to go to. And the ultimate sanctity of life is always ingrained into every officer, that is what we have to do, is protect everybody's life.
Yeah, no one wants to see police officers get hurt by someone with a mental illness who's in a real crisis. Similarly, no one should die just because someone with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder happens to be from a low socioeconomic status or whatever and face a bunch of barriers or access to quality health care.
Absolutely.
How do you think we can evolve the continuum of force so that the choices when confronting, say, a young black 15-year-old male with a knife who's clearly experiencing some type of mental health crisis? Because what 15-year-old boy is going to run around here sanely with a knife? And they aren't limited to hard physical takedown or tasing to go all the way to deadly force being authorized. And I know in the Marine Corps, deadly force was only authorized at a certain point where you really felt your life was in
And
danger.
it's the same way, and with police officers, you have to feel that your life is in danger or the life of somebody else, or imminent danger. So that is the threshold. So somebody armed with a knife, I'm not talking generalities here, but again, if we're able to contain that individual, just as far as, holding them to a certain location, time is on our side. Now, if they start harming themselves, then we have to intervene in some manner. And tasers are a less lethal option for us. The impacts on that only last 5 seconds, and there are no side effects. And so is pepper spray. They are less lethal options for us. And it's important that we have those options so that we're not jumping. We got to have that middle ground. Otherwise, so we're not getting to the lethal aspects of it, because if you don't have something in the middle, I only have a one or this, and I've got to have options basically. So having less lethal options is important, but always time and cover are our best friends. And if we can contain the situation, time is on our side. And that's how we train here in Prince William County. Now, as weapons increase or escalate, then that's a different dynamic, and trying to assess that dynamic as best we can and develop plans and coordinate things is always the best thing to do. We actually teamed up with PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum, a few years ago with their critical incidents, their ICAC model, the Integrated Communications Tactics, where we were helping them develop this program. We were actually a leader in developing. We were one of 7 agencies that taught this right from the start. We helped to develop the lesson plan for it, and they teach this nationally now. And this is something that's been ingrained to our culture for 25 plus years. And it really just comes down to assess what you have, get the resources in place, time and cover, and then just work the problem and take whatever time is needed. We're never in a hurry unless somebody's life is in danger.
And Mr. Phillips,
I guess.
I just want
Go
to say
ahead.
something. I don't want you to ever believe that as a community member that safety is not a priority.
I
do
don't.
want to point out that, and I think this is important because it gives you a segue to understand where the community is coming from when it comes to de-escalation tactics. Nurses, they deal with individuals with mental illness every day.
Absolutely.
And if they don't have they handle those situations, they de-escalate those situations. Now I understand that our officers are not nurses, but this is why I think it goes into this cultural training. It goes into understanding that your body language dictates a certain level of treatment. It understands that we need to start having these trainings more often, but we also need, and this is not a dig to you at any point, but to say that we need a change of arms when it comes down to who's doing the training. You've been in the force for 25 years, and I know you've seen things from 25 years ago are different from how we handle things now.
Mhm.
So the new perspective, community policing, community engagement, de-escalation, all these things need to be at the forefront of the training. And it does take time for someone who's coming in, who's maybe been on the force 3-4 years, who uses these tactics on an everyday basis to move up the ranking to get to the point where they're training someone else. But we need to make sure that the people that are in place, that are culture setters for the police department, are the people that we want in our community to be setting the culture for our law enforcement.
Mhm.
Because I don't want someone setting the culture for our police department who's saying, hey, this situation looks like I'm eligible to use my gun. It needs to be, this is my last resort.
Exactly. You're
And
exactly right
so
on this.
I wanted to start there because I understand that our nurses, our doctors, they don't have that option of pulling out a weapon to sustain someone. However, they have to work within the realms of what they have. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be instances that go and escalate to the point of using a firearm, but I think we're seeing time and time again where someone does not have a weapon or they're not in immediate danger. However, a firearm is used. And I
Mhm.
think people today want answers and they also want solutions. And there's not going to be a quick solution, but they want a solution as in what steps are we taking today to make it so that these incidents happen less or not at all tomorrow. And
Absolutely.
so I want us to start there. I want us to have this conversation about mental health and what we, not just as you as the police force, but we as a community can do to make it better. Because in the end, the only way for us to save lives is to work together.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ms. Potter. That's how we solve problems is together. Um, just a stark difference between a nurse handling and a police officer is that a nurse is in a sterile environment for the most part. Police officers are not. People have access to all sorts of things when we're out in the field and there's that unknown. So while you're absolutely right, nurses do work in because they do phenomenal. They use their communication skills, and that is what we train our officers to do too. So it all starts with communication first and foremost. But the environments are different in the comparison there. So we do have to do better. We do have to work to try and get the resources as a community in place and have more of them, because this isn't a brand new problem. This is a growing problem that has been going on within our community, our society, especially now with COVID. We're seeing more and more, as the mayor said earlier, more people are feeling down and depressed because they can't get out and do the normal things. It's having an adverse effect. May not be to the extreme, but whatever we're feeling right now, think about what somebody who has some type of mental illness or goes into crisis every now and then, it's exponential for them. And we need to understand that aspect as well.
Yeah, what can we do as a community to help the police? Like, what is your ask of the community? How can we help you in these situations so that you can do a better job
Um,
keeping the community and the officers safe?
Reporting things to us. I mean, I know that it's a hard ask, but when you see something, you've got to report it. Being neighbors, being good neighbors, we talked about earlier, and that knowing what's going on around you, and that when you see something, you understand that this is out of the norm. And when you talk to us, you can relay that information to us, as opposed to just being a bystander that says, I just saw this, it looked weird. That's all the information that you have. So the more information, the better. And by being good neighbors, I think we can do that, because I know what's going on. I know my neighbor and my next door neighbor, and I know they have somebody who in the household who has Alzheimer's and has episodes every now and then. And so I can help relay the information when I hear something that's going on. Just the more information, the better. And in reality, it's also supporting our community services staff and the professionals. And as we go through a budget process, and showing that support, and being willing to come forward and say, no, we need this to be in the forefront for our community, because it's important. So in talking with the Board of County Supervisors, which I know they're fully involved on, but they need to hear just as much from the community, so they can prioritize their spending towards this issue, because they have a hard lift in prioritizing the budget for our county resources, and they need to hear from the community. So we can't be bystanders. We have to be active. We have to be engaged all the way around.
So the community, there were a lot of protests over this past summer. Mainly, it erupted nationwide after the incident with George Floyd. And there were cries from the community that actually said, defund the police department, take some of the resources away and put them towards mental health, put them towards other type of training. How do you feel when you hear those conversations coming from the community? When you hear, let's take that money and let's put it because of these mental health resources, and because you've clearly said that, hey, we're not mental health specialists. So how does that make you feel? Because that's been a loud cry from various members of the community.
Yes, it has. And they're not wrong in the fact that we need to put more resources towards community services. That is 100% accurate. And be able to provide not only for those with mental health, but those with substance abuse. We need to do more there, absolutely. But the answer is not taken away from one agency to give to another. We have to do both, because while the police agency, as large as we are, we actually need more staff. And if you start cutting away, well, one of the first things that typically gets cut away, and I'm not saying this would, is training. And training is paramount. We cannot sacrifice that. And by providing the resources to the police department, we can better equip ourselves and provide better training. So I would actually say you need to actually invest in the police department, invest in community services. It's not about taking one from another. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's about, prioritizing for our community and putting those resources forward. Unfortunately, the resources are finite, and the money is finite, because you can't, and that's where our Board of County Supervisors have to make hard decisions. But it's not taking one from the other.
Man, this has been, I think, a great conversation. And I mean, it's so much. We probably got about 20 or 30 questions that have come in since there. We almost got to do a part 2. I'm going to go around and give everybody a chance to kind of like give 5 minutes closing remarks, because I don't want to keep everybody up here all day. But this is, mental health, community policing, really getting the community involved is a conversation that we got to keep having, because the more we have these public forums and these transparent conversations, and the more we get the community engaged, the better change can take place. Because I don't know who said, I think it was Albert Einstein said, or somebody said, you can't grow at the same level of knowledge that you have. You need more knowledge to get to the next level and to be able to graduate. And so ladies first, we'll give Sheba, we'll give you opportunity to give some closing remarks, Mr. Potter, and then we'll let you close out, Chief.
I think I want to gift you this. I am a mother of 3. My kids are 17, 19, and 21. And I am a heavy disciplinary in my house. They, I take their phones. They're not above whippings in this house. We use belts. But I can't always show up to be the disciplinary. They can't always go to dad and get money and go to the mall and have their ways. It has to be both. I can discipline them and tell them I love them at the same time. So I encourage you to take the trainings to the communities. Before you hire an officer, when they're a recruit, check in with some civic associations in different communities and different cultures and allow them to be a part of the process. Looking at the body cam footage, let the entire force see what is working and what is not working. You know, be both. Be both. And when we say defund the police, it is about taking away disciplinary actions and punitive actions from the community that have caused harms for centuries and reallocating to a better community for all. It's not just saying let's strip money away from the budget of police because we don't want police. We all want police to show up in the same manner in every community in Prince William, in every community across Virginia. So, you know, engage with the community, see that as a gift, and understand that it has to start at elementary school and middle school and high school. And that has to be one of the trades that we pinpoint. It can't just be the hard labor stuff like, you know, plumbing and welding and cosmetology and things. Start at a young age and keep it a consistent relationship, just like parenting. You can't just show up with the belt and say, hey, all right, you messed up, I'm going to be the one to discipline you. You also have to be the person in the community that says, hey, I'm here at this basketball game. So um, I'm gifting that to you. Look at it from the perspective of I'm not just going to be showing up to do this arrest. I am going to be there from step A to step Z.
You're absolutely.
Well said. Well said. Titus.
So one of the things I want to leave off on that I find is so important is culture. We have to work to change this culture, and it's going to start by getting our officers on foot, walking in the community. I shouldn't only see officers walking around in the community inside the mall. They need to be walking in neighborhoods. We need to go back to true community policing, walking through neighborhoods, learning about the community. Because when you do that, you establish a rapport and you establish an environment where people feel comfortable enough to approach said officers. If you're not walking in the community, you're never going to get out and play basketball with the 5 and 6-year-old kids so that they learn to trust you. If you're walking in the community, you're going to see that elderly person who's going through dementia and doesn't know what's left from right, but you're going to learn how to engage with that person because you saw them every day. We have to get our officers boots in the streets, in the community, not just in the cars. And we have to start thinking about safety, like you said, holistically, because the same safety I want to have for my officers on the street, I want to have for my individual citizens that are walking around the community every single day. I want situations being de-escalated. I want us to take, earlier we had a conversation about what steps are being taken. I don't want you, Chief Phillips, to just review when there's a complaint. The same way that my boss, my supervisor may go through and review some of my cases out of the blue just to make sure that I'm doing my job correctly. I want you to take that time to go through and look at your officer's body cam footage to make sure that, hey, when you approach this situation, you were doing it in a manner that may have escalated it. I wouldn't have done it that way from a training perspective because we're never above training. And if we're only responding to concerns when there's a complaint, then we're missing the 100 other issues that took place where someone was said, you know what, I'm just too lazy to complain, or I just don't have the heart to go through the process to complain. So we have to take preemptive measures to make sure that our officers are an essential piece of community engagement and not detachment. And it's going to start by reviewing them from the jump. From the jump, the same way you will review your child's homework, you know, without being told by the professor, without being told by your child's teacher, you got to review their body cam footage because I guarantee you're going to see things. And those things that you see might not lead to discipline, might not lead to, you know, a formal in trouble type situation, but what it will do is lead to trainable moments. And if we start training early and we continue this training where people know, hey, Chief Phillips, he cares. He's going to be looking at our body count. We better make sure we do our job right. We better make sure we're approaching this, not just when someone is shot, not just when someone complains, but because you're looking. And I know it's a hard burden to put on you, but that's why you get paid the big bucks. That's why you got all the awards. And I appreciate everything that your officers are doing and everything that's happening in the community. But we got to start here.
Thank you. Well said. Chief Phelps, closing remarks.
I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity and listening about your police department, and because it's important. It's important that we have these conversations. I've always been, since I've been in this acting role, I've been committed to being anywhere, anytime that somebody asks me to have these hard conversations. I've always been willing to talk about the elephant in the room and being transparent about things. It's there's no secrets in my eyes as far as what we do. There shouldn't be. Now, I can't obviously divulge things that are ongoing, but until they're done, and then we can have harder discussions. But it's just important that people understand that this department does care, and I grew up in this community, and I care. This is my community, and my mom was a police officer here in the 70s, and God rest her soul, because she just passed away a few weeks ago. But I grew up caring about this department, caring about this community, and that's not going to change. So no matter how hard the conversation gets, I'm here to answer those questions. And I'm sure Chief Newsham, when he comes in, he'll have the same mentality about engaging our community, because we need to get it right. We only get one chance to get it right, and we're committed to doing that. Not just us, but at the officers, they're all committed to doing the right thing the right way in the best manner possible. And that's important to us. It really is.
Wow. First, our condolences on the loss of your mom. You know, I can't imagine, losing my mom. 2020 has been a tough year for a lot of people, and to be able to still get out there and, who's taking care of the officers when they go through a mental crisis or a mental challenge as well. There is a such thing as post-traumatic stress syndrome in our workplaces, not only for military guys coming back from war. So definitely our condolences go out to you and your mom. I thank all of you for just taking the time to have this conversation with me and all of the community that took time out to just listen to this live conversation. We wanted to be transparent about not only the topic of mental health, but community policing, and just you got to hear the hearts of how people really felt. These are raw emotions, and we're all human in this, and we're all in this together, and we're all going to figure this out. It's a system that's constantly got to evolve, and it's going to take the community really coming together to have these tough conversations around the changes they want to see. We also need you to take an active role, not in just complaining, but being part of the solution, right? People who not only could probably fit the description that the police look for, but we looking for people, again, that represent the community to start to apply. You heard the chief say they have job openings. Why don't you step up and be a police officer? Why don't you go through the training and work your way up to become a trainer? It's all part of the process, and everybody has to be a part of the solution, not just a part of the problem. So we want you to step up as community, as not only citizens in the community, but your neighbors, your friends, have them apply, have them get involved. Be willing to become the solution to your own problem. Be the change that you want to see in the department. And with that, we want to say goodnight and bring everybody onto the screen at one time so you can see everybody. Thank all our panelists again for being out. To everybody that was watching, if you just tuned in, sorry, you can go back and watch the replay. We'll leave this posted up there for you, and you can hear the conversation. And we may go in the chat and see if we can go by, and maybe the chief can respond to some of the other questions. But you all have a great night.
You too.
Boom.
Everybody have a good holiday.
Bye, everyone.
I just stopped.